Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on containers being an essential part of cloud-native approach. I am Sophia Taskin, Marketing Associate, Pi Data Centers, and your host for the evening. On behalf of Pi, I would like to thank for all of you to take out time for joining us today. We start today's event with a keynote session by Mr. Sundar Mutevi, Chief Technology Officer, Pi Data Centers, throwing light on simplifying the workflow with one platform container as a service. This would be followed by a well-appointed panel discussion where we will have eminent industry experts joining us and sharing their perspective and experiences. We will also have questions at each of every segment. So audience is requested to key in their questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom screen. On that note, I would invite Mr. Sundar Mutevi, CTO, Pi Data Centers, to take the stage for the keynote session. Over to you, Sundar, sir.
Thank you, Sophia. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Hope everyone's doing fine. I welcome you to the seminar from Pi, where we introduce our revamped service of Kubernetes as a service. It's nothing new to us, though we have gone and done a lot of redesign, replatform ourselves to provide this service to a lot of our clients who have been asking it for a while now. We have watched this space of containers over the years. Our first container was launched in 2017, 2018 timeframe. Then we kind of looked at how the technology was moving and changing, so that we wanted to kind of tweak it to what the market is looking for. Many container technologies have changed, sunsetted due to community support and things like that. So we kind of looked at all those options, and finally we kind of decided to launch our current containers. So our container platform, basically, our Pi K8 as a service, is a one platform in the sense that, you know, we kind of make it provide to a lot of functions and management functions that can be done without jumping between 2 or 3 portals. So it's a single pane of look through to the entire container environments. It's basically based on what we have been hearing, what our clients wanted out of a management tool like this, especially a cloud management platform like this. Whether it's security, whether it's creating services or creating different environments, talking to environments that have already been provisioned in other clouds, whether it's on-premise or, they wanted a single platform where they can manage all these things without re-logging in or without, having a disconnect between 2 environments and such that. Our platform pretty much sits on something called Rancher. Rancher is our main technology tool that we've used. It's supported by SUSE, which we have modified a lot and tweaked it in such a way that management deployment, and also control is optimized. Whether it's security, whether it's networks, whether it is infra-related management and things like that. We have provided what Pi offers is that it sits with the client. It kind of gets to know their needs, their exact needs, and then it kind of tweaks the container environment for them. Whether it is security, whether it's scalability, whether it is monitoring, and many such features, we are able to kind of customize these for the clients. Like I said, the whole platform sits on a Rancher environments and Rancher technologies. Dedicated Kubernetes clusters can be launched within a matter of seconds. We can have scalability, like as we scale containers and as we collapse containers. And then we are kind of tweaking this as we move along, based on different workloads from which clients come from, whether they have already existing platform, existing containers, we can bring them into this platform, and so on and so forth. Management of clusters, management of nodes, hosts at the back end, whether it is server nodes, whether it is persistent storage nodes, is all done through this platform. We work with the customers. We work, part of our package includes some basic support, but they can also take our managed support, where it's really value added, where we set up everything for the customer to looking at his current needs, his future growth, and plan accordingly. This is the basic portal. What our portal and the platform gives you is a very rich marketplace, which is kind of packaged and built in, and then we customize this according to the client needs, deploy them, and provision them. We in fact even take care of the future growth, any issues, and also when clients want to move from migrate from other clouds onto here, or kind of talk to other entirely other deployment areas. Adding hosts, adding nodes is very simple, very easy. The users have the ability to do it. We can help them out to set those things up. Infrastructure, we optimize it so that they don't over provision or under provision it. We suggest that while they're deploying it. We help in entire deployments too, to enable this. And we keep changing the portal. It comes with many changes. We upgrade whenever it's required. The beauty about this is we can also white label it to certain customers and clients. We can modify them, tweak it to however they need to look at, or slice it into what exactly they need. So it's highly customizable. I'll quickly jump over to a quick short demo that we have one of the portals running. Give me just 1 minute here. In the meanwhile, I'll just share our live environment. So this is our live environment. Like you see, we have the nodes here. One particular thing is that we work with Intel, who give us their latest hardware that's coming out in the market, optimized for containers. And then we kind of, this particular node is an ICX based chip node that we have used. And we have kind of recorded some very impressive stats from here, bringing on containers in the nodes and deploying them. Have the times of deployment have cut down significantly because of the ICX platform is optimized. More on that, definitely write to us to hear about it. So this is and then as you see, deployment of clusters or nodes, it's all in one click of a button. You can customize the YAML files and directly deploy them. And a whole lot of networking capabilities are also provided here. Sophia, over to you.
Thank you, Sundar sir, for informative keynote. I'm sure our audience would have gotten a fair insight on the Pi container as a service. So moving forward, now we get into the panel discussion of the webinar. For that, I would like to invite Mr. Vijay Sharma, General Manager, North and West India Pi Data Centers, who would moderate this panel discussion. Over to you, Vijay.
Yeah, thanks, Sophia, and thanks, Sundar, for that wonderful keynote. We now move on to our next segment, which is the panel discussion. Our topic for the panel discussion is: in today's evolving digital economy landscape, are containers an essential part of the cloud native strategy? But before we get into the discussion, there is certain statistical data around it which I would want to share. According to a research report, container industry at a global forecast is expected to grow from 1.3 billion US dollar in 2021 to 3.6 billion dollar by 2026 at a CAGR of 22% during the forecast period. My personal take is that we are still in the early phase of 2022, and with container framework further maturing and growing more business relevance in years to come, we should not be surprised if year 2026 shows at least 3x growth of what is predicted today for 2026. On this forum today, we get to hear it from the industry experts, who I am sure would help to demystify our perception around if containers are growing up to be an essential part of the cloud native strategy for the organizations. I would now want to invite our panelists for today's panel discussion. Our first panelist for today's panel discussion is Mr. Manjunath Prasad, Head IT, TVS and Sons.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome, Manjunath. Our second panelist for today's panel discussion is Mr. Tushar Zade, CIO and Chief Digital Officer at Origin Pharma.
Hi.
Welcome,
Hi,
Tushar.
Vijay. Hi, thanks, Vijay. Thanks for having me.
Our third panelist for today's panel discussion is Mr. Ramkumar Mohan, CIO of Airworks. Welcome, Ramkumar.
Thank you, Vijay.
And our fourth panelist for today's panel discussion is Mr. Sundar Muthevi, CTO of Pi Data Centers.
Hi, guys.
So we move on with our questions for the panel discussion. And my first question is to Sundar. Sundar, we all heard you speak at length on Pi Container as a Service and its key features during the keynote. Taking a thread from that, how would you summarize the difference between other container platforms and Pi Container as a Service?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So what are we looking at? We're looking at GKE from Google, AKS from Amazon, AKS from Azure. There's an IKS from IBM. And of course, there is Mirantis, Docker Enterprise. So these are all great platforms and catering to a lot of big companies. Fundamentally, many of these platforms kind of lock in the usage to some extent. We have from the beginning made sure that there is no such technology lock-in or architecture lock-in in any of our platforms, including this. It's very hardware agnostic. We can switch and swap between hardware and fully customize from portal all the way down to the client, whether it is cost, whether it is performance, and flex it to their needs. So this, I think, is the biggest advantage we have over the major players, is the flexibility and cost.
Okay. Thanks, Sundar. Thanks for your views. My second question is to Manjunath Prasad. As much as we speak about container on cloud or container in general, would you like to throw some light on the growing relevance of container in today's industry dynamics?
Thanks, Vijay, for that. Yes, containers are definitely growing in a big sense across the verticals and across industries. Every industry who is trying to adopt to grow digitally, where they're trying to grow enormous on the IT solutions front, definitely at one point of time they are forced to adopt this container model, because gone are those days in the traditional way where if you have to do one change, you have to put down the entire application down, where you have to enable the all the there'll be different business units of using that application, so you have to give an impact to all those things. Now with this containerization model coming in, so those kind of downtimes are going out, so it improves the drastic performance of the business application, as well as it improves the CSAT improvement of the business users, expect user customers. So because the application need not be taken down, and if because an application will be used by different units of the department, be it a franchising model, be it being from the retail spare parts model, automobile sector, we have franchisees, distributors and all, and everybody has to have a different flavor of those application menus what they use, which they are not supposed to have each and as a prescribed. So in this kind type of utilization, definitely containers have played a big role, and it has drastically improved our CSAT, customer experience and the customer performance, by adopting these latest technologies and trends. That's what I would like to say.
Yeah, thanks, Manjunath. I think very well answered, Manjunath. Thank you so much. We now move on to our next question. My next question is to Ramkumar Mohan. As the technology leader of your organization, if you were to create a business case for adoption of container in your organization, do you think it's an essential part of your cloud native strategy? And the second part of the question is, what would be your top 4 driving factors to substantiate your business case?
Thanks, Vijay. Now, before I comment on whether container is essential part of cloud native or not, I like to touch upon a little bit on the cloud native strategy and the approach that today's organizations are taking. We all understand that cloud native strategy, it allows us to achieve a defined business objective by exploiting the cloud infrastructure, right? Now, when we talk about cloud native as an approach, it is to build and running software applications that exploits the flexibility, scalability, and resilience of cloud computing. Cloud native app development typically includes marrying microservices, cloud platforms, obviously containers, Kubernetes, and immutable infrastructure, or you talk about the APIs and the CI/CD, the continuous delivery and the continuous integration that we use or organizations use, along with the techniques like DevOps and Agile methodology. So, having said that, we all live in a cloud age. So we expect software to meet business need, by performing certain tasks, whether it's small or large. But we expect them to do it quickly and inexpensive, and we expect to be able to ramp up capacity on demand and to tear it down once done with it. That's what the business expects, and that's what we technology leaders are trying to do it. Now, we don't care, where the program runs. We just want to run it as the business demands, as the customer demands. We want the changes to the software to be written and applied quickly. Now, containers are part of a more general software approach called cloud native, or a response to this demands. So in my view, container is definitely an essential part of cloud native strategy and a crucial entity in a cloud-based infrastructure. Also, one of the characteristic of cloud native is container based. So that answers why container is essential part of cloud native strategy. Now, talking about business case, I mean, as a technology leader, I'm sure other panel members would agree with me. It's not easy to, buy the approval from the board, but yes, looking at the business case when it comes to containers, there are definitely benefits that one can look at and make it part of the business case. From my perspective, I would say the productivity improvement. That's one of the thing that I would use in my business case, because developers that have integrated containers into their development tool chains have seen improvements in productivity. And one of the key reasons why is that containers provide pre-made platforms that are easy to spin up and use by developers, right? So it improves the productivity of developers, and it also containers also gives the developer tools, pre-install and images that can be used for building and testing applications in an environment that closely mirrors a production environment. Even currently also, we maintain different environment for production, for testing, for development, all those things. But using container, this requirement can be addressed. This challenge can be addressed. The other benefits that I would talk about in my business case is how this could improve operation efficiency. Container by their nature help improve operational efficiency because they decouple applications from the underlying infrastructure. This means that application can be patched independently of the infrastructure without disturbing both the applications and infrastructure. Therefore, no applications can be patched on a very tight pace, and the way we are currently doing it, we have to ask for downtime. All those things are not needed when we use containerization. This can be done very quickly. And the other benefit is time to market. It would definitely improve the time to market because, from business perspective, one of the best ways to improve revenue is to improve time to market. And the combined effects of containers on developers and improved operation efficiency means that the software can be shipped faster with a fewer bugs. This not only improves customer satisfaction, but also translates into getting new features and new software into the hands of customers before the competition does, right? So that is something that I would include in my business case. And the other fourth one would be the TCO, the lower TCO. Besides the benefit of efficiency and productivity gains, containers generally have a lower TCO, right, than the existing virtual machine infrastructure. There are a number of factors involved here, but then it hinges on the fact that containers do not carry with them operating systems and their associated cost, licensing, and the maintenance cost of operating system, all those things. So by eliminating this overhead, it can substantially reduce the total cost of ownership for any application being deployed into container. So these are some of the benefits I would include in my business case. There are many, but then just to answer your question, these are 4 benefits that I would talk about, Vijay.
Thanks Ramkumar for sharing your views and also bringing out your strategy very clearly over this platform. I would now want to take the same question to Tushar.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Vijay. I think I largely agree with what Ram just now spoke and what Manjunath also brought to the table. Well, Ram did cover a lot about the business side of it, which I'll also try to cover because that is something we all come to. I mean, at the end of the day, like you mentioned, 22% CAGR for containerization. absolutely good statistics for you. But from a industry perspective, which are going to adopt container, I think that particular number will also affect our CAGRs, right? So absolutely, we are all on the same side of the table. Maybe before I answer your question, let's take a step back, and I would like to divide the entire business into three broad buckets, right? And each bucket of it, how as a cloud native or a cloud first strategy, all of us are actually trying to work upon. The first bucket is around getting the opportunities or increasing the market share. How do we do so? Is by getting more leads, more MQLs, getting key accounts and everything. We increase our whole market share. Second is around the customer experience. This is where I talk about the retention. This is where we talk about the customer satisfaction, CSAT scores, and all this stuff. And the final bucket is around productivity. This is where how do we fasten our process of turning back, of a turnaround. If I'm manufacturing, how can I manufacture faster? If I am doing the research, how can I do research faster, right? And the reduction of the whole TAT is the name of the game, right? So in the entire business, take it any business in the world, it runs around these three basic principles, right? From a digital standpoint, I mean, you can name an application which will not fit into either of this. Every application, be it on a container, will fit on these three buckets, right? So if you talk about a marketing parlance, then maybe you look at some applications which are helping me to identify what customers I should reach out to and how I should reach out to. If from a retention perspective, there are portals, there are options where people can log into your website and they can understand that how you are doing business, what kind of business you are into and all. And you can of course increase the CSAT by giving them the best in class service. Productivity, again, there are digital applications which are cloud native microservice based applications which will help you to increase your productivity as well. So digital as such has gone the extra mile and has covered the entire three buckets what I just now spoke about. Right. The conversations in the boardroom have actually changed a lot. Now the questions are getting asked to all the CIOs in the company that, hey, if I'm the CEO, if I give you $1 million, can you give me 10 million back? So questions are now asked in this way. The whole return of investment is actually coming into play a lot. The speed of which the whole IT setup and the application deployment is happening has to be faster in order to support this ever increasing demand of digital native and digital enablement. Right? We are seeing in a paradigm shift even in the healthcare space, wherein the patients are getting monitored right from his home to the ambulance, to the hospital, to the operation theater, and so on and so forth. So at a healthcare space, since I'm representing healthcare, I would say ability to monitor a patient remotely is going to be the future. And applications which are cloud native will be the future for doing so. Again, I'll not talk about edge computing and all those stuff which are underlying nowadays. But of course, those are also equally important for all of us, right? For doing all this, I think the scalability becomes most important constraint which we all see. I think from an on-premise perspective, from an on-premise setup perspective, there were numerous challenges. It was not scalable, it was not interoperable, there were issues with the cybersecurity, maintenance monitoring was an issue, BCP, business continuity plan was an issue. What if my PC goes down, can I bring back my DR and all? So all these problems are largely solved with the whole cloud first strategy, which Ram briefly spoke about. Right? So I'll not repeat what he has already spoken. And containers to the audience, maybe I'll take a step back and try to explain how containers and VMs are similar, but still yet there are quite some amount of differences between the two. Containers are quite similar to VMs, okay, but they are more relaxed and isolated. They are isolated from this OS and amongst different applications, okay. So the containers are considered as lightweight. VMs were quite heavyweight, right? Now containers are quite lightweight. There are multiple benefits of containers, like maybe 4 driving factors, what you asked for. Since Ram has covered the business aspect, I will cover the technology aspect of it. I would say the first and foremost benefit is that it is lightweight, it is portable, right? While you write a software once, it can be deployed on any computing machine. It can be deployed on cloud as well. Containers increase the whole efficiency of the utilization of resources like the computational power, memory, etc. of the hardware on which you are trying to run the container. The application now have an ability to do granular scale up. Now, when I say granular scale up, I mean it's like Lego blocks where we're talking about the microservice-based architecture, right? So the containers do support microservice-based architecture. The developers can deploy smaller components and can deploy it on the production without taking it out, right? The containers also provide an application level isolation, as well as the faster communication with the hardware, right? So thus it actually fasten the whole process of delivery and the go-to market, the first to market, what Ram has already touched. I think definitely it will add up to the whole business case, which I would like to present to the management. And one important thing, I think the whole DevOps, because again we're talking about the operation side of it as well as the development side of it. The whole DevOps and DevSecOps will also be an integral part of the whole business case which I will try to put in. And I think all this put together with these old driving factors in the business case, I think I'll be able to make quite a strong business case in any organization to invest in this. Yeah.
Thanks, Tushar, for your views and also sharing your strategy and also the business angle around it, and also clearing the air that IT teams or the departments are no more a cost center, they are a revenue generating department or a center, I would say. Thanks, Tushar. We now move on to our next question. My next question is to Sundar. There are two technologies, Sundar, that are nearly synonymously spoken about. One is Kubernetes and other is the Docker. Would you take the lead to demystify the difference between Kubernetes and Docker from this platform today?
Yes, that is a question that keeps coming up a lot. Basically, they're two different things entirely. When you talk of Docker, it's the technology which actually creates the container. You can package a lot of things in the container. You can package like an application and a database in the same container. And then you create an image, what is called as a Docker image. That is where your application stays in. That's pretty much what Docker does. And then, of course, you have the integration to change management and all that, CI pipelines and all that, configuration of different versions and all that. When you talk of Kubernetes, it is an orchestration platform which manages all these Docker images, where it gets deployed, on how many replicas it should have, which host it should go to, the entire ecosystem, and managing these so-called clusters is what Kubernetes does. So typically, Docker is the technology by which the actual containers are created through images, and Kubernetes is the one that kind of orchestrates or manages this host of clusters or containers together. Docker itself has got a small orchestration engine by itself, but it's kind of scales lesser than Kubernetes. That's why the industry shifted towards Kubernetes, because on two very large environments, it's capable of managing.
Okay. Thanks, Sundar. Thanks for bringing in these differences very clearly to all of us. We are almost halfway, so we move on to our next question. My next question is to Tushar. Tushar, as per you, what are the tangible and intangible benefits when we run the workload on a traditional VM environment vis-a-vis on a Kubernetes?
Great, thanks, Vijay. Thanks for the next question. So, maybe I'll again try to give you a parlance of how IT organization sits within the bigger space of a product-based company. So basically, any department as an IT department in any organization, there are 6 basic towers, right? One is the IT operations. This is where all the infrastructure, your laptops, desktops, data center, DR, everything comes into play. Next is the information security. This is where you define a whole structure for the company, that how can I keep my company secure. Next is the IT compliance. Of course, we all need to comply with all the requirements from the authorities. Next is around business operations. Now operations can be around your supply chain, your finance, HR, and all. Then digital. Digital is the key, is the next big thing. Analytics. The 6th one is analytics, right? So the focus from an organization perspective is now moving from I to D, from information technology to digital now. So from a department which owns the important asset for the company, which is data, I think as a leader for IT, I think we would prefer to reduce our load from the whole traditional infra setup to a cloud first kind of a movement, right? And we all are in support of that, right? So that we don't have to worry too much about the IT infrastructure. Though the services have largely been outsourced, many of the on-prem systems still exist, right? So, and they will continue to exist till the time that mindset in the management is not changed, right? Also, information security. The moment you are taking and we are having a concept like CSPM, the cloud security posture management, of course, the entire gamut of things can be secured even on cloud. So there are multiple things. I think as a CIO, we should move away from the I to T by doing a cloud first kind of a strategy. Now let's take a step back. Few decades back, I think the way traditionally things used to happen was there used to be a hardware, there used to be an OS on top of it, and on top of it was used to sit an application. Now then, after maybe a couple of decades later, they came with virtualization. So how is the virtualized environment deployed? Is you have a hardware, you have an OS on top of it. On top of it, you have a hypervisor, and then you have VMs. Each VM will have its own OS, it will have its own bin, it will have its own library, then it will host the apps, the applications, right? Now, moving towards the containerization part of it, I think the whole story changes the moment we go to container, right? We have a hardware which underlines as it is. On top of that, we have an OS. Then comes the container runtime. On top of that, you have different containers. Now, container 1 can host an app. Container 2 can again host an app. Container 3 will also host an app. Right? So containers are actually a good way of bundling application, the dependent objects, some OS components, whatever it requires, and putting it into a container, into a package. But what will happen if a container goes down? Again, another container should get started. Right? So how does it happen? This is where the whole Kubernetes comes into picture to your rescue, right? So I just tried to give a very basic example of how it is different and what Kubernetes does for those who might have not understood prior. So I hope that will help you. So Kubernetes, or also called as K8S, is nothing but, in a broad definition. I mean, when I was preparing for this particular panel, I was going through a lot of content on the internet, and it's all across the place, right? But then I found this very interesting definition. It says Kubernetes is used to orchestrate containerized cloud-native microservice apps. Okay, I'll repeat. It is used to orchestrate containerized cloud-native microservice apps. Right? So there are multiple benefits. This entire definition, if I break it into smaller pieces, you will understand. So I list down some 4 to 5 basic benefits which we have in Kubernetes as compared to a traditional VM kind of a setup. Right? First and foremost is the whole load balancing piece. If the traffic to a container is quite high, Kubernetes will actually help us to distribute the traffic to another stable kind of a container. It will also help you to do storage orchestration, right? So you can choose the storage, whatever you want to do. It can be local storage, it can be a public storage, it can be cloud, it can be anything. It helps you to automatically roll out and roll back, right? You can create new containers. It will help you to have a rollback strategy, which was not that easy earlier. After that, I think one of the most important thing which I liked about it is they call it as self-healing. Containers are self-healing. When as soon as there's a container which goes down, it automatically gets replaced by another one. It's called as a self-healing attribute, right? So Kubernetes gives the ability to become cloud independent. Right? So this is a very important aspect which we all should underline as a technology leader. That today, if you want to move away from a GCP to AWS to X to Y to Z, right? How will you do that? With Kubernetes, I think that can be done quite easily, which was not possible earlier if you had a traditional VM kind of setup. That's about it today.
Yeah. Thanks, Tushar, and thanks for bringing out those tangible and intangible benefits very clearly over this platform today. Thank you. I move on to Mr. Manjunath Prasad now for my next question. So, on the same line to what I asked Ram and Tushar before the poll break, I would want to come to you to understand that as the technology leader of your organization, if you were to create a business case for adoption of container in your organization, what would be your top 4 driving factors to substantiate your business case?
Now, well, the scenarios are different now. Now the business is behind us to give them the justification to roll out faster, rather than we going and justifying them the need of it. See, the strong factor that justify for the containerization and the future is going to be serverless and all those technologies to come in will be the one, the performance improvement, the customer experience, what they'll feel. Okay, these are the strong driving factors which will give them a seamless experience to experience the solution, digital footprint. And the third factor is if you want to the speed and agility to come in, then definitely you have to adopt this current trends and technology. So that will be the third factor, which will be making a business case for the adoption of these technologies. And the fourth, definitely the all kinds of business doesn't fit the same bill. So you have to be evaluating seriously of what is required to be in this container mode, because everything cannot fit the same bill. So you have to be prioritizing of what should fit into this model and versus the other models, because there are traditional approaches, there are other approaches. It cannot be, the containers cannot be deployed for all, once over all. So you have to be evaluating and prioritizing what should be the business case scenario that fits this model, and then take it up appropriately. So this will be the 4 factors which I think will be more stronger to ensure that containers, the serverless architectures, those adoptions will be moving ahead faster as more than we expect. That's my view.
Thanks, Manjunath, for sharing your views and also your strategy around this. Thanks. So my next question is to Ram Kumar. Ram Kumar, what do you think is the business impact of adoption of container, or if at all there is an impact?
Now, when we talk about impact, I think we discussed the positive impacts in detail. So I presume this question is to talk about the other side. If we go for container adoption, so I will briefly talk about the negative side or the impact or the challenges. Vijay, I think that's a question, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now Tushar and we all discuss, and Tushar has put it very beautifully about container and how it can benefit the business. Now the other side, if business wants to adopt container, now the impacts. Referring to one of the reason, not a reason, one of the survey that was conducted sometime back, people, the technology leaders was questioned about the challenge of containers. What is the biggest challenge that they would face? And 53% of survey respondents said that container management is number 1 challenge. Now, container management by large percentage, it's considered a most significant challenge to organization. But then as we listen to Tushar and even to Sundar about Kubernetes, Kate is, I think the reason why this came into place is to manage or address that challenge. Now, having Kate in place, I think that problem gets addressed. Organization can use Kubernetes to address this container management problem. Now, the other challenge that business could face is, we spoke about virtual infrastructure, and I presume most of the enterprises would have this traditional infrastructure. Now, virtual has become traditional. So if they have this traditional infrastructure with a significant investment in place and very mature process that run the systems, then there is a challenge. How do we adopt containers? How do we, what happens to the existing investment into, the traditional infrastructure? That could be a, challenge that we need to address when we plan to adopt containers. And the reason, because containers are stateless, so they do not support integrated enterprise requirements. So that's where the challenge starts. So that we'll have to address any business. And the legacy storage architectures, they are quite complex, and they lack API functionality that we all use heavily nowadays. So they do not support this modern automation using containers. And we all understand the existing storage does not scale with apps and performance, which is unpredictable. So this is some of the impact or challenges that we may face when we plan to adopt containers. One of the other major challenge that I want to highlight before I close is from the IT operations side. Now, developers, they have adopted DevOps, they have adopted agile methodology. Now, for them, adopting containers may not be that difficult. But then the IT ops team or the infrastructure team that is managing the infrastructure or providing support, they may face problem if there is no enough skill set on how to manage and support containers. So that's another challenge with respect to shortage of skills. So that organization needs to address if we plan to adopt containers.
Yeah, thanks Ramkumar for bringing in those ideas about the business impact on the new technology. My next question is to Sundar again. If we talk about the Blue-Green deployment strategy, do you think containers can be deployed under the Blue-Green strategy during business hours while the environment is live? And what are the risks and the rewards around that?
Yeah, sure. Definitely, Bluegreen strategy is possible and is deployable by using the DevOps integration. Docker and the Docker Hub is where images can get stored and a pipeline can get created by moving your development, test, and production workloads. The challenge is in maintaining these pipelines, in maintaining the right repositories to be used in large teams, and managing them in most effective way. It can get complicated if it's not designed properly. At the same time, it adds a host of advantages where the time to production is cut down a lot. So definitely, blue, green, yellow, whatever those strategies are possible. It's a matter of how you integrate your CDCI pipelines, what kind of repositories you use, whom you give access to those repositories, and manage those teams to pull down those code bases and develop, and then so even if one particular update doesn't happen, one particular pipeline gets broken, then it could lead to a lot of complications in redoing and all that. So definitely they can do those kind of deployments.
Thanks, Sundar, for clarifying the doubts around this question. My next question is to Tushar. In case Tushar, if you want to answer, or maybe we can move this question to someone else. How much is Kubernetes or container in general dependent on the underlying infrastructure in terms of virtual machines, bare metal, etc.?
So I think while I try to attempt to answer this question. So, so like I was mentioning, like, so overall, from a Kubernetes kind of a perspective, I'll answer the Kubernetes perspective. So what happens is, like I mentioned, the whole orchestration of the apps is dependent on the Kubernetes, which it takes care, right, in terms of deploying the app, in terms of rollback, rollout, in terms of what should I give as a computational power, or actually I can keep it as a memory, and all those things can be supported by Kubernetes very well. And it also has the capability to manage it overall, right? So that is the whole perspective that I wanted to bring. So if you look at it, so I think from a one of the key feature of Kubernetes is something called as automatic bin packaging. Okay. Now, which means that it helps you to cluster all the nodes and then run a container on top of it as a task, right? And then it will, you tell that, okay, this is the CPU computational power, I'll give it to you. This is the memory I will give you. And Kubernetes will try to manage with the same. Right? And then, of course, the scalability is always there. You can scale up and scale down. So, really, to be very honest with you, from a hardware perspective, I think the more better you have a strategy across in terms of planning it ahead of time, I think you can manage it well. But from a Kubernetes perspective, of course, it can be managed. The container is automatically packing the bin. So surely we don't have to worry about that. Vijay.
Thanks, Tushar, for taking this question up. Ramkumar, in case if you want to extend or share your views on the same question to what Tushar said.
Vijay, if I understand, and then the question is about whether to use
If
containers on virtual machine or bare metal. If I
Correct.
understand, okay. Now, in general, containers depend on underlying infrastructure, whether it is virtual machine or bare metal. So that is very, very, yes, it needs that infrastructure. Now, whether to run it on bare metal or on a virtual machine, I think both has pros and cons, using container on a virtual machine or bare metal really comes down to speed and efficient use of hardware resources versus isolation and ease of portability, but if you look at, organization, if they plan to adopt containers, and they have already invested into the virtual infrastructure, I think it's become easier for them to use VMs for containers. It becomes easier because it is already there. You have been managing it. You understand very well what is VMs. So it's very natural to consider running our container environment within the existing virtual environment, right? And I believe most of the infrastructure teams would do that. I think it's a good way to get familiar with containers, when we start using it, the existing infrastructure, keeping the investment intact. But then as the team progress from proof of concept to development and testing, and then to production deployment, there are cases where VM-based containers are less than ideal. As I said, both has its own pros and cons. Now, there are plenty of advantages of running containers on a bare metal service. One thing is having container on bare metal servers eliminates the overhead of the host operating system. Tushar has explained very well. So if we have it on bare metal, we don't need to rely on there is no need for the host operating system or even the hypervisor and the guest operating system, right? If we run container in a virtual machine, the virtual machine has the guest operating system, all those things. Whereas in bare metal, it is not. So that overhead is definitely eliminated. And also running on bare metal utilizes more system resources in a more efficient way, than VM-based containers, because By their very nature, containers have all the resources they need to run, including their file system, network stacks, which allows many more containers to be run on the same infrastructure than virtual machines. Hence, containers on bare metal provides better, more predictable performance and lower total cost. Having said that, the other side, there are potential concerns. Running on bare metal servers, we'll have to manage the security. Not only security, even the lack of true isolation if you're running it on a bare metal servers. Because when we run it in a virtual machine, the virtual machine helps us, with the isolation. Each virtual machine is isolated from other virtual machine. But on bare metal, this could be an issue, right? Because containers make use of the operating system kernel, and in most cases, the same library that could potentially represent opportunity for an attacker if the container could be compromised. So lack of isolation, also an issue if we go for bare metal containerization. Now, so we'll have to take a call whether we are looking at performance, more resources, speed versus security and isolation. Running containers in VM has its own benefits. So I think we'll have to take a call based on the business need, which one works better. But then, as I mentioned in the beginning, for us, it becomes easier to use the existing infrastructure to start with, so that you play around, you understand without making heavy investment. And then once you are clear about containers, then you can obviously choose the best one, whether it's bare metal or VMs.
Thanks Ramkumar, for sharing your views and also bringing in that practical approach to this. Thank you so much. So on that note, to conclude this panel discussion, I would like to thank all our panelists for their time and participation. It was great interacting with all of you. I also had my share of learning as well. From here, it's back to you, Sophia.
Thank you, Vijay. That brings us to the end of this webinar session. On behalf of PI Data Centers, it's my honor to thank our eminent guest on the panel discussion today, giving us experience and knowledge insight. I would also like to thank Mr. Sundar Sir for his wonderful keynote. Last but not the least, we would want to thank our wonderful audience who took time to be part of this webinar today. I'm sure there would have been significant takeaways for all of us from you, from both the sessions. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening till we meet next time.